From the time that I was very young, even as a small boy, I remember having a lot of deep-seated fear about money. There was something about money that made me afraid and uncertain. After I got married and started building a family, I began to ask God to send men into my life to teach me the truth about money that I did not know. That was when Ray Poteet and Nelson Nash came into my life, and I learned about the infinite banking concept. This podcast is about the love affair that I have been having with infinite banking since that time. Welcome to the Dirty A Financial Podcast. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's always a privilege and a joy to be here with all of you. Today, I want to take a step back and just do an overview podcast on Infinite Banking Simplified. Infinite Banking Simplified. At this point, there's so much information on the internet about infinite banking. You know, infinite banking's gone viral on certain social media accounts, and there's all these companies out there doing things, and there's a lot of information, and it can really be information overload. And a lot of people look at infinite banking from different perspectives. And if you talk to people about infinite banking means different things to different people. I want to make a podcast today about what does infinite banking mean to Michael. How does he simplify it? And what Michael gets it from is from Ray Poteet and Nelson Nash. And where do I see the most value for people, and where do people get the most value from infinite banking, and how can we simplify it down? Because really, ultimately, whatever we're doing in life, I have found that really the only things that matter are the simple things. Really simply, how does this benefit me? What pain is it addressing? What pain does it remove? And I'm going to start by telling you a short story here. Back in 2019, my wife and I bought our first home. We had rented up until then. We had rented a house and we had a really good landlord. And so we did that for the first really half of our marriage. We were renting. But then in 2019, we bought our first home. And I got a traditional mortgage from a commercial bank to do that because I had only been doing infinite banking for about a year at that point and certainly didn't have enough cash values built up to finance the whole mortgage myself. And it didn't, I was in the infant stages of learning infinite banking. So I got a traditional mortgage, and I just remember that the whole underwriting process for the loan was incredibly frustrating, and you had to It felt like the DMV. It felt like you had to answer the same questions over and over and over and over again. And you had to let everybody look at everything you never wanted anybody to look at, all of your tax returns, all of your bank statements, all of you just had to unzip and show the world everything and basically make all of your finances public is what it felt like, which nobody likes to do. And then I remember the day that we went to the title company to close on the house, and it took like an hour just to sign everything, like sign this, and then you sign this, and then you sign this, and then you sign this. And anyway, the whole process made me feel very small. And honestly, it made me feel like a financial slave. And it really did feel like putting myself in slavery to a big financial institution for the next 30 years of my life, and it made me understand why people want to pay off their houses early and as quickly as possible just to get the bank off their back. And, it was just a very unpleasant process. And then in 2023, I was able to finance the mortgage with my mother. And I remember that it was just so simple and so freeing and so easy. The whole process just felt so freeing, and I didn't have to show anybody tax returns, and I didn't have to show anybody any bank statements, and I didn't have to, I just had a discussion with, my mother about our financial position and what we were able to offer. And she wrote a $300,000 check to the title company. I wrote a $10,000 check to the title company. And when we went to the title company to close on the house, I think it took about 5 minutes. I think I signed 2 pieces of paper, and they were like, "Thank you, have a nice day." And the whole process just made me feel so free because I was free. I wasn't being controlled by the dictates of some bank. The place where I live and where my children sleep wasn't being controlled and collateralized by, a giant corporate business anymore. The thing, and then every month that I make my mortgage payment to my mother, that's money that stays in the family and gets leveraged in our policies, and all that money is going to reappear. She gets to use it now, and it gets used to fund premiums and more policy loans and more investments, and then all that money gets multiplied and shows up in her estate, tax-free. Infinite banking is about controlling the financial environment in which you operate. It's about freeing yourself and your family members from the control of banks for generations to come. My oldest son is 11 years old, and if he gets married, let's say he gets married when he's 25, that's 14 years from now. In 14 years, let's say it's 3 weeks until the wedding, and I tell him and his fiance, hey, I want to meet with you guys. And we sit down with them, and I say, look, I've been putting money into life insurance policies for Caspian, since he was very young. And I just want you guys to know that I'll finance with the family bank anything that you guys want to buy. The family will underwrite it. And if you guys want to buy a house or buy a car or spend money on education or make an investment or whatever you want to do, the family rule is you need to check with the family bank before you go finance something at any other bank so that you can hear all the terms and decide, whether you want to participate in it or not. These are the benefits that you get if you participate, and these are the benefits that you lose if you decide to do your financing with the world instead of with the family. And, if you make all your payments on time, I'll start transferring ownership of, and you show faithfulness and good stewardship with the family bank. I'll start transferring ownership of these policies on you to you. And then you guys can own and control the leverage and that I spent 25 years building for you. I'm going to feel pretty good about that when I get to do that. And I'm going to feel pretty good about the fact that, every payment that they're making for the things that they were going to buy anyway is making me richer in the short term and making them richer in the long term and making the whole family wealthier. I mean, I'm not adding some expense into their life that they weren't going to have anyway. This is something that they were going to buy anyway. And if the family didn't provide for it, well, then they were going to have to shop. They were going to have to shop in the world for this kind of thing. And they would have been, financing is a product and a service that people have to buy. It's unavoidable. Infinite banking is the recognition that there's always a cost of capital and you've got to shop for it somewhere. And most people don't have a family bank established where they can shop for money and financing. So they have to go to some other finance company to shop for financing. And they've got to finance the things of life somehow, whether they're buying their own home or renting, or whether they're, buying cars outright with cash or getting loans. It doesn't really matter what they're doing. There's always a cost of financing. And infinite banking is really about, ultimately, for me, it's about the feeling of being free. The feeling of being free that comes from the reality of being free, that comes from my experience, that comes from the joy of being able to finance, having the option to finance anything that I want without having to talk to a bank. A life insurance company is really just another finance company. That's really what it is, just like a bank. But what the life insurance company will do is it will offer me legal binding contracts that give me ownership of the equity and give me ownership of the cash flow, give me ownership of the leverage of leveraging my own liquid equity, and put me in charge of the loan repayment terms and everything else. It privatizes financing. And as Nelson says in his book, there's two different ways of doing that. You can your own bank. You can go start your own commercial bank and get a charter and raise all the money and do all these things. And I remember Ray told me, I'll never forget when he told me like 3 different times he worked really hard with a group of people. Okay, we're going to start our own commercial bank. And each of the 3 times they just stopped and said, no thanks, because it was so much easier to just build a system of life insurance policies and handle all the financing privately. The infinite banking concept is simply the recognition that you can do all the financing you would ever want to do with the life insurance company. You don't have to use Federal Reserve system of commercial banks and lenders and deposit companies. You don't have to use those finance companies. If you don't want to, you can establish your own in a completely different environment. Infinite banking is the recognition that, commercial banks don't have any reserve requirements really to speak of anymore. I mean, I can pull up Gemini right now on my computer and say, what are the reserve requirements for banks now? It used to be 10%. The reserve, and you can you can plug this into your AI as much as you want and go look it up for yourself. But the truth is that reserve requirements for banks are 0%. Now, I'm going to ask you, I know the answer to this. When did reserve requirements for U.S. banks go to 0%? March 26th, 2020. Part of the COVID-19 epidemic. Life insurance companies have huge reserve requirements. They're required to hold in cash reserves everything that they've promised to their policyholders. I mean, and there's just a million reasons why, but none of infinite banking comes from life insurance. I'm not an advocate of life insurance. And it's so easy for people to think, oh, this is all about life insurance, or Michael's a life insurance guy. I'm not a life insurance guy. I'm a freedom guy. And if an opportunity came along, if the banking laws in the United States changed and the government came in and put in large reserve requirements for commercial banks, and I had the opportunity to open my own commercial bank with a group of other investors that I knew and loved and trusted, or by myself. And if someone could demonstrate to me that there was less red tape in doing that, that it was safer, there was less hassle, and I had more freedom and more control to control financing by doing that, I would abandon life insurance and go do that. I'm about freedom. But the reality is that life insurance in the United States right now, and for a very long time, for the last 100 years, and even longer than that if you look back, life insurance has been a much better place to do financing for a very long time than the commercial banks. And the only real problem that exists is the fear of premium. So when I say the word premium, everybody just thinks, oh, I made a $100,000 deposit in my bank. We tend to think if you make a $100,000 deposit in the bank, that's a good thing. But if you pay a $100,000 life insurance premium, that's a really bad thing. And we've all been just deep conditioned to think that. But the truth is that that's not true at all. That when you understand what a life insurance premium is on a dividend paying whole life insurance policy, a participating dividend paying whole life insurance policy at a good mutual life insurance company. It has to be that. A whole life insurance premium is just a transfer of capital. That's all it is. A mutual life insurance company is just a depository, just like a commercial bank, and the contractual terms that you get for your deposits at the life insurance company are just astronomically better. But it's not because I believe in life insurance or something like that. It's because I believe in freedom and control, and I want to control the financing in my life. I want to in other words, I don't want to have to go through life for the rest of my life knowing that anytime I want to make a major purchase, I either have to have that much money stored in deposits somewhere because I can't access my investments whenever I want to. Like, my investments are my investments. I don't want to go through the rest of my life having, a very limited number of options for how to finance something. I want to be able to finance things on my own terms. And therefore, I want to have a large pool of liquid cash available at any time. And you can do that with the growth stock mutual fund. You can do that with T-bills. You can do that with, CDs at your local credit union. You can do it with any financial machine you want to use it for. But the simple reality for me is no one has ever shown me a better place to hold a large liquidity position to have available at all times, not just sometimes, at all times. So that no matter what big expense comes along in life, a home for me, a home for my son, a home for my grandson, a new truck, a new roof for the house. I want to send my son to aviation school for whatever that is, whatever it costs to, get into aviation. I want to make I want to loan, $800,000 to a friend so that he can start a construction business. It doesn't matter what it is. I think whatever the need for financing is, I want to be able to handle that myself. And the only way to do that is to build up a really large, privately owned system of liquid equity. I mean, if you went to the bank and said, I want to borrow $1 million, and they said, well, we don't have that much money. Well, what would you think of that bank? You're in the business of having that much liquid money. I mean, if the bank doesn't have it, they can't lend it. That's why they want deposits, because deposits are the cheapest money that they can get. So that's what I want to do. I want the feeling of freedom and control that comes from the reality of freedom and control. And I've been through the pain of bank underwriting. Now, I've never been through the pain of bankruptcy, of not having enough cash flow to pay the mortgage on my house and having the bank repossess my house. But I do have a friend, and I'm not going to even say what state he lives in, but I do have a friend where the bank is foreclosing on his house right now. And I'm watching this unfold in his life. And it's horrible to watch. And I would never want to go through that. And I would want the flexibility with the family bank to say, okay, well, we can give you a 24-month reprieve or a 12-month reprieve on your payments while you get your feet back under you, rather than the bank coming along and just having this inhuman corporate process for taking, your home away from you where your children sleep. And that it's about removing that pain and removing the expectation of that pain that sits in the subconsciouses of so many people. That's what infinite banking is all about. At the beginning of his book, Nelson says, we're so conditioned to think of a life insurance premium as just an expense. We're so conditioned that premium is just a bad thing, period, end of story, and keep it as small as possible or eliminate it. And so because we're conditioned to think like that, therefore, with life insurance premiums, we view it as this annoying thing that we have to tolerate when we're done. And maybe when we're older, we won't need it anymore, so we can get rid of it. We're conditioned to think that way about premiums. And therefore, we keep our premiums as small as possible. And that keeps our cash values as small as possible. And so we end up being in the actual position in life where you never have a bunch of liquid equity at the life insurance company. And if you never have a bunch of liquid equity at the life insurance company, if you never have a bunch of money there, you can never go through the experience of what it would be like to finance major items with a life insurance company. You never know what that feels like. You never know what it's like. You never go through the process. You never even try it. And, something that Aslan tells Lucy in the Chronicles of Narnia, if you've ever read the Chronicles of Narnia, it's a children's fairy tale series by C.S. Lewis, where he describes many of the greatest principles of life. My wife and I have often commented that the Chronicles of Narnia is the greatest catechism for children that we've ever encountered in our life. I mean, aside from the Bible itself, of course, but the Chronicles of Narnia is like a catechism for children in fairy tale form. There's 7 different books. And Aslan, the lion character, says to Lucy, one of the children who wanders into this fairy tale, there's a point at which she has disobeyed him for a little while. And he's correcting her and disciplining her a little bit by having a kind of a stern conversation with her. And she asks him, what would have happened if I had obeyed? And Aslan says, child, no one is ever told what would have happened. And so for me, when I encountered this concept, I thought, I don't want to get to be 100 years old and think, I'll never know what would have happened if I had done what Nelson said to do. And what Nelson says is, at the beginning of the book, he says, this book is a workbook it's basically a workbook for a 10-hour seminar that walks you through, this is what would happen if you made your life insurance premiums as high as possible, as high as you could possibly stand. Well, what would happen if you did that? Well, you would have a large amount of cash value at the life insurance company. And then if you have a large amount of cash value, i.e. liquid equity at the life insurance company, that enables you to finance major items at the life insurance company, because how much you can borrow from the life insurance company is dependent on how much cash value you have built up. And the more premium you pay, the more cash values you build up. And Nelson says this book is about the lifestyle. What kind of lifestyle results from having really high premiums and lots of cash at the life insurance company? Basically, it takes permanent life insurance and scales it out into a business that can finance basically everything the family would ever need. And that's how it works. There's just so many things out there about infinite banking and about how it really works. But it's really just the simple recognition that we've been conditioned that premium is bad. It's only a bad thing. It's only an expense. And we should get rid of it as quickly as we can or keep it as small as possible. And when that happens, you never get to try the lifestyle of what it would like to have really large premiums and therefore really large cash values, and what it would look like to be able to finance everything that you buy with the life insurance company rather than with the bank like we're currently doing it. Infinite banking is the recognition that you have to do banking with someone, somewhere. The things of life have got to be financed somehow. Why wouldn't we just redirect all that cash flow that I'm paying, and particularly my children and grandchildren, and then particularly to build a culture in the family where this is just what we do. Like, we don't finance things with the world anymore. We finance it with the family. And to me, it's exactly like the peasants who built the cathedrals in the Middle Ages. I've been to London. I've been to Westminster Abbey. I've been to Canterbury. I've seen Canterbury Cathedral. And you stand in these cathedrals and you're like, this is so beautiful and it's so huge. How did they do this? And then you go look up the history and you find out that it took 200 or 300 years to build some of these cathedrals. And you realize, wow, the people that started building these cathedrals knew that they were never going to see it completed, but they did it anyway. And I want to say that it's that kind of thinking that would heal so many of the cultural problems that we're experiencing right now. Wendell Berry is a modern author who he lives on a farm and he writes beautiful novels and beautiful poetry. And one of the things that he says is, you should plant trees. You should plant trees and you're never going to see them in their full glory, but do it anyway. Do it for your children. Do it for your grandchildren. And I can tell you that starting infinite banking from square one is like planting an oak tree from an acorn. That is the process of infinite banking. And I did it from square one. I did it from scratch, and I'm never going to see it in its full flower and full glory. But I've got 4 boys, and they're probably going to get married, and they're probably going to have children, and their children are probably going to have children. And my prayer and my aim is to build a culture in our family where we build a privately owned system of financing that we just use exclusively, and every penny of interest that we spend for financing in the family is kept in the family. And not so we can get rich. I mean, it's not about accumulating a certain family net worth. It's about being able to, I saw this wonderful post the other day from one of my pastors that I listen to. Derek Prince said, "Abundance is a beautiful word that occurs many times in the Bible. In essence, it means you have all that you need and then some. You have blessings left over for others. The will of God is that we, as his people, should serve him with joy and gladness for the abundance of all things he has given to us." And I believe that that's true. It should be true of our time, our effort, our energy, and our finances, and everything that we have. We should be able to move into abundance where we have everything that we need and we have some left over for others. And my goal is to have an abundance left over for my children and grandchildren, and to have taught them the stewardship principles of finance so that they can take over the family financing operation and use it to finance everything that they and their grandchildren would need, and to have a superabundance left over to be able to support their church communities and the local charities and all the local efforts to steward this earth well that God has put under our charge, and to take ground for the kingdom. Infinite banking is about being free. It's about being in control, and it's about understanding that the most profitable thing that we can do is not achieve some kind of net worth or income or rate of return, but it's to build a system of financing that puts us in the driver's seat, that puts us in control of all the cash flow that's happening, both on the personal level and the business level. And the infinite banking concept, using properly structured life insurance policies, is the best way that I have ever found to do that. And if someone can show me a better way to do that, I would love to know. And I've been asking that for years, and I haven't seen it yet. So I'm continuing to do it the way that I've done it since 2017. That's infinite banking simplified. It's about a lifestyle. It's about a lifestyle of being able to live with the deep feeling of freedom and control that comes from the reality of freedom and control, from eliminating commercial banks from your life and being in control of the cash flow and the financing of everything that we finance for the things of life. So that's what infinite banking is all about. That's infinite banking simplified. It was a pleasure and a joy and an honor to be with you all here this week. Talk to you next week. Take care. God bless.